Let me ask you something uncomfortable. If your life is exactly the same a year from now, same habits, same excuses, same anxiety dressed up as realism, would you admit that you chose that? Because here's the part nobody wants to hear. Most people aren't trapped, they're addicted. Addicted to familiar suffering, addicted to explaining why they can't change, addicted to calling their fear logic. You don't need more information. You don't need motivation. You don't need another productivity hack. You need to stop lying to yourself about how much control you actually have. Because if thoughts didn't matter, if belief didn't shape reality, if the mind had no power over the body, then explain why stress makes people sick. Explain why fear shuts down intelligence. Explain why confidence changes outcomes before skill ever does. You already know the mind matters. The real question is why you're still pretending it doesn't. This video is an educational commentary and analysis created under the Fair Use Act for the purpose of learning, criticism, and transformation. It does not replace the original work. If anything, it should make you uncomfortable enough to go read it yourself. The book is You Are the Placebo by Dr. Joe Dispenza. And before you dismiss that title as spiritual nonsense or self-help fluff, let's get something straight. Joe Dispenza is not a motivational influencer. He's not a life coach. He's not selling vision boards and positive vibes. He's a chiropractor by training, a neuroscience researcher by obsession, and someone who rebuilt his own body after being told he would never walk again. Not metaphorically, not emotionally, physically. 6 fractured vertebrae, no surgery, no miracle drug, no external intervention, just disciplined mental focus and a willingness to test whether the mind actually does what we casually pretend it does. This book asks a dangerous question. What if the placebo effect isn't a trick, but a function? What if belief isn't a psychological illusion, but a biological command? What if your body isn't breaking down randomly, but following instructions you didn't realize you were giving it? Because the placebo effect has always been treated like an embarrassing glitch in medicine. Doctors hate it, pharmaceutical companies downplay it, scientists call it noise. Why? Because it suggests something terrifying, that the body listens to the mind, that expectation alters chemistry, that belief can outperform drugs, and if that's true, then most people aren't victims. They're participants. This book isn't about denying illness. It's not about just think positive. And it's definitely not about pretending problems don't exist. It's about something much more threatening to your ego. Responsibility. Responsibility for your thoughts. Responsibility for your emotional habits. Responsibility for the identity you keep rehearsing every day. And here's where I'm going to be very direct. If this book angers you, if it makes you defensive, if you immediately look for reasons it can't be true, that reaction isn't intellectual skepticism. That's your identity panicking. Because if Dispenza is even partially right, then you've been outsourcing your power your entire life. This video isn't here to comfort you. It's here to clarify something you already suspect. Your mind isn't neutral. Your thoughts aren't harmless, and your body isn't separate from who you think you are. In the next sections, we'll break down the core ideas of this book, not as motivation, not as spirituality, but as a system, and whether you like it or not, you're already running one. Welcome to Mindful Reads Hub. Let's get started. The moment you wake up. Most people think their life is the result of luck, genetics, geography, or timing. That's the comforting lie. Because if it's random, you're not responsible, and responsibility is terrifying. The opening of this book dismantles that illusion aggressively, not gently, not politely. It starts with a blunt question. Is it actually possible that the mind can shape reality to the point of life and death? Not metaphorically, literally. The book opens with real cases that make rational people deeply uncomfortable. A man diagnosed with terminal cancer dies on schedule, only for the autopsy to reveal the cancer was never fatal. A young student overdoses on what he believes is an antidepressant and collapses into shock, sweating, blood pressure crashing, until doctors tell him the pills were inert. His body recovers within minutes. No drug entered his system. Only an idea did. That's not philosophy, that's physiology. Dispenza uses these cases to expose something most modern cultures refuse to confront. Belief isn't a nice mindset add-on, it's a biological command, and the body listens whether you agree with it or not. If this sounds extreme, it shouldn't. The World Health Organization has published for years on stress-related illness as a global epidemic. In Japan, death by overwork, karoshi, is legally recognized. In India, mass psychogenic illness still spreads through schools when fear circulates faster than facts. In Europe, placebo-controlled trials routinely show that belief alone accounts for 30 to 60% of treatment outcomes. This isn't fringe. This is medicine, quietly admitting it doesn't fully understand the human mind. The book's opening argument is not that medicine is useless, it's that medicine underestimated something fundamental. Doctors are trained to treat chemistry, tissue, and pathogens, but the signal that organizes chemistry often comes first. Expectation precedes reaction, meaning precedes molecule. This is where the book becomes confrontational without ever raising its voice, because if thoughts can kill, then thoughts can heal. And if that's true, then most people are not passive victims of circumstance. They're unconsciously rehearsing the same identity every day and calling it who I am. Dispenza doesn't frame this spiritually at first. He frames it mechanically. The brain is a prediction machine. It constantly scans the past to anticipate the future. When you repeatedly think the same thoughts, you activate the same neural networks. Those networks signal the same chemical states. Those chemical states condition the body emotionally. Eventually, the body becomes the mind. You don't think anxious thoughts, you are anxiety. You don't feel hopeless, you live hopelessness. And here's the part that should make you angry. The body does not know the difference between a real event and one vividly imagined. Neuroscience has proven this repeatedly. Brain scans of people imagining an action versus performing it show near identical activation. Olympic committees use mental rehearsal because it works. Surgeons train with visualization because it improves precision. Yet somehow, when it comes to your own life, you pretend your thoughts are harmless background noise. They're not. The book uses these early stories to force a realization most people resist. You are always practicing something. You are rehearsing your future emotionally long before it arrives physically. That's why people stay sick even when the diagnosis changes. That's why lottery winners revert to baseline misery. That's why people leave one toxic relationship only to recreate it with a different face. Recent conversations on podcasts like Diary of a CEO and On Purpose have echoed this from a psychological angle. Trauma therapists now openly state that the nervous system doesn't respond to logic, it responds to expectation and safety signals. Epigenetic research from Europe and Asia shows that chronic emotional states alter gene expression across generations. Your internal world is not private, it's instructional. The opening of this book is essentially a wake-up slap, not a hug. It says, stop asking whether change is possible. Start asking why you keep proving the same reality to yourself every day. Because the most dangerous belief isn't that change is impossible, it's that you're already awake. Key idea. Belief is not symbolic or emotional, it is biological, and the body executes it without debate. Key takeaway. If your life feels stuck, it's not because you lack information or opportunity. It's because you are unconsciously rehearsing the same internal state and calling it reality. Favorite quote, you don't discover your power by pretending it isn't real. You discover it by noticing that the life you have now is the life you keep choosing. The greatest lie medicine ever told. There's a story most people still refuse to face. Your body doesn't just passively react to treatment, it participates. It's not the helpless passenger watching life happen. It's an active interpreter of every belief you feed it. This is one of the core truths Dispenza tries to hammer into your skull. The placebo effect isn't medical illusion, it's biology in action. The brain doesn't sit in its ivory tower, separate from the body like some Greek philosopher. It's in constant biochemical conversation with every cell, every organ, every immune response. Science now confirms what old healers claimed for centuries. Belief has physical force. In clinical trials around the world, placebos trigger responses in the brain that are indistinguishable from real treatments. Brain regions associated with emotion, reward, pain modulation, and motivation light up when a person expects healing, even if the pill is just sugar. That's not fairy tale. That's hard neurobiology. And here's something most people still refuse to hear. This effect doesn't require deception. That was the dogma for decades, that placebo only works if you're tricked. But a series of modern studies in Europe and the US, including open-label placebo trials, show patients improve even when they know they're taking fake treatment, as long as they understand why it can help. That flips everything upside down. Most medicine has operated under a Cartesian split, mind over here, body over there. But the latest neuroscience dissolves that distinction. Placebo responses are mediated by the prefrontal cortex, the limbic system, and ancient survival circuits, the same pathways that govern pain, fear, motivation, and reward. These aren't stories, they are neurological facts, and the world is starting to catch up, though slowly. Look at scientific podcasts and new research. There's a series called The Placebo Chronicles that explores how imagination, expectation, and ritual shape real physiological outcomes. Episodes dive into how music therapy, hypnosis, meditation, and spirituality can engage placebo mechanisms and trigger genuine healing pathways. This is an anecdote. Even mainstream institutions like Harvard Health now publish articles acknowledging that placebos can activate feel-good neurotransmitters like dopamine and endorphins and reduce symptoms just as effectively as conventional treatments in many pain conditions. This isn't fringe anymore, it's peer-reviewed science, and yet most people still shake their heads and shrug. They say, yes, placebos help pain sometimes, but what about cancer? What about autoimmune disease? What about reality? What they refuse to understand is that placebo isn't a cure-all, it's a mechanism. It's not magic, it's expectation shaping neurochemistry, which then shapes bodily states. That's biology with agency, not biology as a robot. Here's the daily life example that makes most people uncomfortable. Consider chronic pain sufferers in Australia, the United States, and Europe, whose symptoms improve simply because they trust their treatment provider and expect relief. The same phenomenon shows up whether it's a traditional healer in Ghana, a clinician in Sweden, or a meditation practice in India. It's not culture specific, it's human specific. The brain's networks don't care where you live. They respond to expectation. In fact, some of the most fascinating research isn't about healing, but about why the effect exists at all. Animal studies show that conditioned responses, associative learning, when the brain connects context with outcomes, can trigger immune changes and hormone release even without conscious belief. The body doesn't need to think it will get better. It needs to interpret sensory patterns tied to past healing. Now, the controversial edge, placebo isn't always positive. The nocebo effect, the dark twin of placebo, proves belief can hurt you too. Negative expectations actually amplify pain, weaken immunity, and increase symptoms. This is documented in research on antidepressant trials where up to 75% of the effect was attributed to placebo dynamics, meaning belief can be a bigger driver than the drug itself. This gets to something the book wants you to confront head-on. Most people treat their thoughts like spectators, but thoughts are instructions. Fear isn't harmless. Worry isn't abstract. They carry neurochemical weight. If you believe you are weak, your body coordinates with that belief. If you expect healing, the body will organize pathways to produce healing-like outcomes. The political and ethical implications are massive. If mind-body integration is scientifically real, then medical practice, education, public health messaging, and personal behavior all have to adapt. Western medicine has historically ignored this because it disrupts the pharmaceutical model. You can't patent belief, you can't sell expectation, but you can sell pills that, guess what, often work because of the context they're delivered in, not the molecule inside. The most deceptive lie society repeats is, your thoughts don't matter biologically. That's not just wrong, it's dangerous. Because if beliefs do shape outcomes, then every moment of self-talk is a biological command. This changes therapy, education, parenting, stress management, even how we understand epidemics. The mind is not a powerless epiphenomenon, it's a control system. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. The body listens, the brain instructs. Belief is biology. Key idea: expectation, belief, and neurobiological context shape real physiological responses. Placebo is not illusion, but measurable brain-body interaction. Key takeaway: every thought and expectation carries biochemical consequences. Understanding and directing those can change how the brain modulates pain, mood, immunity, and symptom perception. Favorite quote: the body doesn't heal because a pill entered it. It heals because the brain expects healing and the chemistry follows that expectation. Your brain is listening to every thought. Most people still think thoughts are just thoughts, like little feelings bouncing around in your head that somehow don't touch the rest of you. But that's a lie your nervous system doesn't buy. Here's something the world is finally admitting. When your brain expects something, relief, healing, change, your nervous system acts as if that thing is actually happening. Not magic, not wishful thinking, hardwired biological response. That's what modern neuroscience is increasingly proving. Look at the latest neuroscience news from the National Institutes of Health, where scientists have now mapped an actual brain circuit tied to placebo pain relief. They trained mice to expect relief in a certain environment, and later, even when the pain stimulus was the same, those mice showed actual reduction in pain-like behaviors, all because expectation activated specific neural pathways linking the cortex to deeper brainstem regions rich in opioid receptors. That's not philosophy, that's cellular biology. And this isn't isolated to rodents. Multiple major studies, including large fMRI mega-analyses, show that when people anticipate benefit, parts of their brain involved in pain and emotion literally change how they process input. The thalamus, basal ganglia, and somatosensory cortex, the areas that build the experience of pain, light up differently when expectation enters the picture. You don't just feel better, your brain constructs a different experience of reality. A Washington Post piece from early 2025 documented real-life stories of patients with chronic pain and anxiety who participated in open-label placebo trials, meaning they knew they were taking sugar pills, yet many still experienced significant improvement in symptoms. That's not deception at work. That's biology responding to expectation and context. This shouldn't be surprising. Harvard Health now openly describes placebo effects as anything but just positive thinking. It involves real chemical messengers like endorphins, dopamine, and serotonin, the same compounds your brain releases during exercise, love, or reward. When researchers observe these chemicals rise in placebo responses, they aren't witnessing a trick. They're seeing the body's built-in healing pathways turned on by expectation. The book dives deep into this territory, not as woo, but as mechanism. Dispenza argues that the same neurological processes that produce placebo responses in clinical trials are active in your everyday life when you repeatedly reinforce the same thought patterns. Your brain, he says, doesn't differentiate between a real pill and a firm belief. What it responds to is expectation, the meaning you assign, and translates that into chemistry. And neuroscience backs him up. Dopamine pathways, opioid circuits, and cortical expectation networks are all involved. But here's where most people get uncomfortable. Expectation works both ways. The flip side of placebo is nocebo, where negative expectation amplifies pain, fatigue, or symptoms. In some COVID-19 vaccine trials, a huge portion of reported side effects were linked to nocebo responses, people experiencing real symptoms because they expected them, even though they got a harmless injection. That should disturb you if you think belief is harmless. Podcasts like On Purpose with Jay Shetty touch on similar themes, even if they don't use the word placebo. They talk about how stress, expectations, sleep, and memory shape physical experience. A recent Jay Shetty episode dove into how brain systems related to attention and memory aren't isolated modules. They interact with emotion and expectation in ways that directly influence physiological state. This fits a larger pattern. Belief isn't just mental chatter, it's a neurobiological commitment. Now drop that into your everyday world. A friend tells you a medication will definitely help. Boom, your response is often stronger. A doctor shrugs and says, might help, might not. Boom, your system checks out. A therapist looks you in the eye with confidence. Boom, your cortisol drops. These are documented phenomena, not placebo myth. In sports psychology, visualization alone can produce measurable gains. In chronic pain clinics, empathy and therapist engagement are some of the strongest predictors of outcome. Your nervous system doesn't just register input, it decodes meaning and acts on it. This is the part most people don't want to hear, yet still eat up every self-help meme online. Your brain is not an impartial observer. It's a biological architect shaping how you feel and how your body functions based on what it expects before anything happens. This also reframes how we think about behavior change. If you want different results, information isn't enough. Expectation is the engine. If you still think of the mind and body as separate, that your thoughts are just cerebral fluff, you're living in the 20th century. Modern science has made it clear. The expectation networks in your brain are real biological circuits with measurable outcomes. Key idea: expectations aren't just subjective, they engage real neural circuits that alter how the brain and body respond to pain, stress, and healing cues. Key takeaway: your mind is not a bystander, it's an active participant shaping neurochemical and physiological states through expectation and meaning. Favorite quote: your thoughts are not whispers in an empty room. They are instructions to a nervous system that obeys whether you approve or not. The body obeys the mind. People still act like the brain just sits there passively, like some observer glancing at life from the cheap seats. But science tells a very different story. The brain is an active command center that shapes the body's responses not only to pain, but to immune function, stress hormones, and even inflammation. Modern research is peeling back layer after layer of what was once dismissed as just psychology, revealing that belief and expectation aren't illusions. They are biological forces with pathways, brain systems, and chemical mediators behind them. It's not mystical, it's mechanistic, and it's freaking profound. A 2022 molecular pharmacology review shows that placebos don't only tweak pain perception, they also engage the immune and endocrine systems, influencing inflammatory markers and cellular responses. That means the same brain processes that can make a headache fade away can also signal the immune system to behave differently. That's not anecdote, it's physiology documented in peer-reviewed science. Think about that. Most people still imagine the immune system as some independent army inside your body, fighting or surrendering based on pathogens alone. Yet here we are, seeing that the nervous system, driven by expectation, can modulate immune response. There's evidence that conditioning and expectation can even change cytokine production, those tiny protein signals that regulate inflammation and immune defense. And no, this isn't just placebo sugar pill lore. It reflects a broader understanding in psychology and medicine that repeated thoughts, especially ones tied to anxiety or worry, have real physiological consequences. There's a named scientific concept for that: perseverative cognition. When you ruminate on stress, your body doesn't just feel anxious. Your heart rate stays elevated, cortisol stays high, blood vessels constrict, immune responses get dysregulated, and your body starts acting as if it's under chronic threat. That's how mental chatter ends up in physical disease. Now let's connect this to everyday life. Millions of people worldwide suffer from conditions like chronic pain, insomnia, anxiety, and fatigue, not just because of external triggers, but because their brains are in a state of anticipation, anticipating pain, anticipating stress, anticipating failure. Research consistently shows that it's not only the events themselves, it's how the nervous system predicts and expects them that shapes experience. Look at recent mainstream reporting. The Washington Post ran stories on open-label placebo trials where patients knowingly took inert treatments yet still experienced real pain reduction. Their brains released endorphins and modulated pain circuits because they expected benefit. It wasn't trickery, it was biology reacting to belief. And don't think this only matters in clinical settings. In sports psychology, athletes who visualize success actually perform better, even though they're not physically training in that moment. Expectation speeds up neural coding, improves focus, and reinforces motor pathways. That's the same brain-body mechanism that can make pain fade or motivation rise without external intervention. Here's where most people get defensive. So the mind heals everything? No, that's not what the science says. Your mind doesn't swoop in like a superhero and magically cure disease, but your brain-body network, the integrated system of circuits, chemicals, hormones, and immune markers, does respond to what you expect, believe, and focus on. That means belief doesn't bypass biology, it engages it. This is why mindset matters when people talk about stress and health on podcasts like Diary of a CEO. Guests regularly explain that chronic stress rewires your nervous system toward survival states, which suppress regeneration, immune function, emotional resilience, and even memory. That's not pop psychology, that's psychoneuroimmunology, the intersection of thoughts and biology. But here's the thing, people still refuse to admit your thoughts carry biochemical weight. When you expect pain, your brain preps your body for danger. When you expect relief, it prepares a different set of neurochemicals. It's not belief willed into existence like a fairy tale. It's expectation activating neurochemical and immune pathways in the brain-body system. If you still think of belief as just mental, you're living in the 20th century. Even genetics research is now exploring how individual genetic variants influence responsiveness to placebo, meaning your biological wiring and belief systems interact in ways medicine is just beginning to understand. This is the real paradigm shift. The body isn't a collection of random parts, and the mind isn't an observer on the sidelines. They are one system. The brain's expectations, conditioned responses, and emotional states ripple through chemistry, immune processes, hormones, even gene expression patterns. So the next time someone dismisses the placebo effect as just in the mind, remember, biology doesn't care what you think belief is. It responds to what you believe. The consequences play out in pain centers, immune signals, hormone cascades, and stress circuitry. Key idea, expectation isn't imagination. It's a neurobiological signal that actively engages brain-body systems, including immune and endocrine responses. Key takeaway, your brain doesn't just experience the body, it coordinates it. What you expect shapes how your nervous system responds, and that response alters physiology in measurable ways. Favorite quote, biology isn't destiny, it's a story the brain keeps telling the body, and you can edit that story if you learn to speak its language. Why most people never change. You ever notice how most people treat their immune system like it's on autopilot, something that either works or doesn't, based on germs and random luck? That's because modern medicine, for all its brilliance, still hasn't fully integrated the idea that the brain and immune system are in dialogue, not isolation. And that's exactly what gets hammered into you here, not as spiritual fluff, but as biochemical reality. When your brain expects healing, it doesn't just whisper to your nerves, it talks to your immune system, your hormones, your stress feedback loops, and your biological defense systems. That's not mysticism, that's physiology, and 2025 science is starting to acknowledge it. You've probably heard of the placebo effect in pain, but the emerging frontier, the bleeding edge, is how placebo neuroscience reveals real interactions between expectation and immune function, something even top medical reviews are now describing as psychoneuroendocrine immune interactions. That's a mouthful, but it effectively means the mind, brain, hormones, and immune system are constantly communicating, and your expectations act as a switch that can turn these interactions on or off. In one striking study, researchers looked at how the brain's natural opioid systems, the same systems that reduce pain and elevate mood, can modulate inflammatory proteins like IL-18, a powerful molecule involved in inflammation, mood, and immune response. When people were exposed to positive expectation, placebo with expectation of relief, their brains released endogenous opioids that actually reduced inflammatory markers associated with pain and immune activation. That's not just feeling better, that's measurable biological change. And don't think this is fringe. Mainstream scientific publications now routinely describe how learning and expectation can change immune responses in humans. Even if the mechanisms aren't fully mapped out yet, the pattern is clear. Repeated expectations, basically your mental habits, can shape how your body responds to threats and stresses. That's a biological feedback loop, not a placebo fairy tale. This isn't just theory. In real clinical reporting, like in the Washington Post earlier in 2025, patients with chronic pain or fatigue have found symptom relief even when they knew they were taking a placebo, as long as the overall context, interaction with clinicians, and their own expectation of relief were supportive. Their brains changed the pain signal anyway. That's not ego, that's chemistry. And yet, society still gaslights this effect. People on forums argue placebo is just perception and doesn't change biology. But that's a narrow view. The fact that expectation engages opioid pathways, dopamine circuits, and even interacts with immune proteins turns the old belief that mind and body are separate on its head. This isn't about thinking hard enough. It's about biological outcomes tied to contextual meaning and expectation. Look at emerging brain circuit research from 2024 as well. Scientists at the University of North Carolina discovered a specific neural pathway connecting the anterior cingulate cortex through brainstem regions down to the cerebellum that modulates pain thresholds based on expectation alone. Even without a drug present, when animals expected relief, those neurons fired and pain thresholds changed. That's raw neural wiring responding to meaning. So here's the point that most people refuse to confront. Your neural states don't just interpret the world, they instruct biology. They dial immune response up or down. They release or suppress hormones. They change inflammation. They literally remap priorities inside your physiology based on expectation and conditioning. That's not metaphysical, it's measurable. And when you see this whole system, expectation as a biological signal, conditioned immune responses, brain circuits tied to mood and pain, what you realize is that your repeated thoughts are not background noise. They are chemical instructions with real impact. Stressful thinking primes inflammatory pathways and stress hormones. Hopeful thinking engages reward and opioid systems that dampen pain and elevate mood. That's psychology as physiology. This also aligns with what thought leaders like Jay Shetty, Matthew Hussey, and elite clinical psychologists are discussing on podcasts, not because they're quoting this book, but because these brain-body links are entering mainstream awareness. They talk about how chronic stress affects the nervous system's baseline, how expectation and visualization influence performance, and how emotional patterns become physical states in the body. That's not woo. That's psychoneurobiology. So the story here isn't just your thoughts feel powerful, it's they are powerful in a measurable way. They shape neural circuits, immune proteins, hormone cascades, and stress physiology. Your belief literally modulates biology. That's the deeper layer this book is pointing you to, and it's supported by global science that's starting to take these mechanisms seriously. Key idea: expectation and belief are not subjective illusions. They engage real neurobiological and immune pathways that can influence inflammation, pain perception, and overall physiology. Key takeaway: your brain-body system doesn't passively exist beneath your consciousness. It constantly responds to your expectations, meaning your habitual thoughts have cascading neurochemical and immunological effects. Favorite quote: "You aren't lazy, you're rehearsing a familiar script. Change isn't resisted, it's unknown." Reality is not what you think it is. Everyone talks about the placebo as if it's some abstract trick. Oh, it helps pain sometimes, that's cute. But that's like saying gravity is just a nice idea. The deeper story, one that actual science is now mapping in real time, is that expectation doesn't just feel like it matters. It reconfigures networks in your brain and body in a way that alters chemical states, immune signaling, and even inflammation. Modern research isn't arguing about whether placebo exists anymore. It's asking how it works at the circuit level, and the answers are rewriting what we thought was biology's rulebook. You still think this is fluffy? Think again. In 2024, neuroscientists at the University of North Carolina discovered a specific neural circuit connecting the anterior cingulate cortex, the brain's emotional and expectation center, through the pons and cerebellum, regions historically associated with motor control, which modulates pain thresholds based on what an organism expects to happen. In experiments with mice, simply expecting pain relief activated this pathway and reduced pain without a single drug molecule entering the system. That's not subjective feeling, that's a measurable neural highway in action. And there's even more. Comprehensive reviews in molecular pharmacology journals now describe the psychoneuroendocrine immune loop, a mouthful that basically means the brain's expectations can influence your hormones, your immune signals, and your inflammation levels. Placebos don't just dampen pain, they can influence cytokines, the very molecules the body uses to signal danger, repair, or stress. You probably think this does something, but only for pain or emotion. That's the old interpretation, superficial and safe. Modern science shows that immune function itself responds to conditioned expectation. Experiments as far back as 2012 demonstrated that immune activity, from T-cell proliferation to cytokine release, can be modulated by expectation and conditioning in humans. In plain English, your immune system listens to your brain's expectations and reacts. Look at how mainstream news now reports this. A 2025 article in the Washington Post covered real people entering open-label placebo trials, where participants knew they were taking inert capsules, yet still experienced real reductions in chronic pain and fatigue, often long after the sessions ended. Clinicians now publicly advocate incorporating placebo-based approaches into standard care, as long as it's honest and consensual. That's a seismic shift from the old sugar pill stigma. Here's the deeper point most people don't grasp. Your brain doesn't wait for something to happen before it decides how to react. It predicts what will happen, and that prediction shapes hormones, inflammatory responses, and neural firing patterns before the physical event ever occurs. That's why stress, a predictive emotional state, can suppress immunity and accelerate disease progression even if the physical threat is mild. Your brain essentially primes the body for what it anticipates. And this isn't limited to pain. Researchers are thinking big, like integrating placebo mechanisms into personalized medicine because expectation can enhance or inhibit treatment effects at the biochemical level, especially in neuropsychiatric conditions, chronic inflammation, and even Parkinson's disease symptom management. Some medical reviews now argue that placebo research should be part of precision medicine because it reveals pathways that drugs alone can't fully target. Some people online have an intuitive feel for this. In forums discussing consciousness and mind-body, people debate whether placebo changes reality or just perception. Neuroscience is cutting through that confusion. It is real biological change. The brain releases opioids, dopamine, adjusts circuits, and alters stress hormones. That's measurable, traceable biology responding to expectation, not wishful thinking. This also ties back to what thought leaders on podcasts like Diary of a CEO, On Purpose, and others are exploring. Not mystical energy or spirit, but how thought patterns anchor emotional states that shape bodily health long before the body ever gets a physical signal to change. Chronic worry, anxiety, self-doubt, those aren't just emotional states. They trigger a cascade of biological responses: cortisol up, immune suppression, inflammation sustained. That's not hypothetical. It's the science of expectation in action. The real scandal isn't that placebos sometimes relieve pain. It's that expectation and belief have predictable, measurable pathways into biology that researchers are only just beginning to map. And if belief, something you generate internally, can modulate neural circuits as powerfully as a drug, then the old story of mind and body as separate realms is dead. That illusion might be the greatest intellectual trap most people live under. You think biology is destiny, but every expectation you carry is broadcasting neurochemical instructions. Key idea: expectation and belief are not abstract psychological states. They engage specific neural circuits that modulate pain, hormones, and immune responses, demonstrating that the brain's anticipatory mechanisms are biologically active systems, not metaphorical constructs. Key takeaway: the placebo effect is not a trick or a mind game. It's a biological mechanism where expectation becomes a measurable signal, influencing neural pathways and physiological responses in ways that parallel, complement, or even enhance conventional treatments. Favorite quote: reality isn't outside you. It's what your brain predicts before life ever unfolds. Becoming the placebo. The most unsettling thing you discover when you actually look at the science, not the Instagram quotes and motivational platitudes, is that your biology listens to your beliefs. And this isn't some poetic metaphor. It's neuroendocrine immune circuitry that responds to expectation, learning, and conditioned patterns in measurable ways. Modern neuroscience is finally catching up to what ancient healers claimed. The body doesn't just react to treatment, it interprets it, and that interpretation shapes physiology. Researchers have found that placebo responses aren't confined to subjective feelings. They interact with immune markers like interleukin-18, a pro-inflammatory cytokine tied to stress and disease, and correlate with release of endogenous opioids in brain regions associated with reward and emotion. This means expectation can reduce inflammation, the very thing that underlies many chronic conditions. The idea that belief influences biology is no longer fringe. In peer-reviewed work, mechanisms involving the mu opioid system, the amygdala, and reward circuits like the nucleus accumbens demonstrate that when people expect relief, their brains release chemicals that actually modulate pain, stress, and immune activity. This isn't just feel better, it's measurable. And these same circuits overlap with pathways involved in mood regulation, anxiety, and stress responses, the very things society is struggling with globally in 2025, from rising burnout rates in Europe and the US to mental health crises in Asia and Australia. Look at the Huberman Lab podcast, where neuroscientists break down exactly how placebo works. Belief and expectation affect neurotransmitter release, hormone balance, and stress responses. They change how your nervous system prioritizes and responds to threats. This isn't hocus pocus. It's biology that can be measured with EEG, PET scans, and hormonal assays. Placebo isn't just about pain anymore. It's about how your entire meaning-making system, the brain's prediction machinery, organizes your biological priorities, and it's everywhere. In clinical settings, researchers are exploring ways to condition immune responses using classical conditioning to train immune suppression or resilience via repeated patterns of expectation paired with physiological cues. You can see this reflected at the biochemical level. In immunosuppression experiments, even a conditioned stimulus, like a taste or environment previously paired with an immune modulating drug, can trigger immune changes later on. That's learned biological response, not accidental healing. The placebo effect has even shown up outside the clinic in news reports where people know they are taking a fake treatment yet still improve. In open-label placebo trials that Washington Post covered, chronic pain sufferers knowingly took sugar pills with full transparency and still experienced relief, largely because their brains anticipated benefit and engaged real biological pathways. Trust, expectation, and cognitive context were the therapeutic agents, not deception. But make no mistake, it works both ways. Negative expectations can trigger nocebo responses, real physiological worsening based on fear, dread, or anticipation of harm. In COVID-19 vaccine trials, the majority of reported side effects among placebo recipients were actually caused by negative expectations, not the biochemical action of a vaccine. That's belief turning into stress physiology. This is why thoughts aren't harmless. Stress, rumination, and chronic worry aren't just emotions you feel. They are biological signals that instruct your body to prioritize survival over repair, immune resilience, and regeneration. The brain predicts danger, raises cortisol, suppresses immune responses, and puts your body on constant alert. That's why stress relates to inflammation, heart disease, autoimmune flares, and more. Not because stress is some abstract state, but because your biology executes the commands your nervous system broadcasts. You can see this pattern in everyday life, from athletes using visualization to actually improve performance, to people who sleep better and feel better before major life events simply because they anticipate success. The brain is constantly forecasting outcomes and organizing physiology around those forecasts. This is a biological prediction engine, not an observer in the back seat. So here's the uncomfortable truth. Your body is not just reacting to the world. It's responding to stories. The stories you tell yourself, the expectations you rehearse every day, and the patterns you have learned. Belief isn't epiphenomenal. It's biological context, and context shapes outcome. Key idea. Expectation and belief engage real neurochemical and immune pathways, influencing pain modulation, inflammation, stress responses, and immune function through measurable brain-body mechanisms. Key takeaway. The brain's predictive and expectation systems aren't idle spectators. They broadcast biochemical signals that shape physiology in ways that can support healing or perpetuate dysfunction, depending on what you expect. Favorite quote: "The most powerful medicine isn't what you take, It's what you are willing to believe. Conclusion. You've just taken a journey most people never will, not because the ideas were too complex, but because they were too true. What you've read isn't a self-help slogan dressed up with neuroscience buzzwords. It's a biological reckoning, a confrontation with the fact that your mind has been running your life the entire time, and most of the instructions it's been following were unconscious. Think about that for a moment. Everything you felt as reality, pain, stress, anxiety, limitation, even healing, wasn't just happening to you. It was being generated by you. Not spiritually you in a vague, mystical sense, but neurologically, biochemically, functionally you. The brain doesn't just reflect the world, it predicts it. It doesn't just experience life, it constructs life. And the evidence is now undeniable. Belief isn't a hostage to biology, it's a biological driver. Throughout this breakdown, we saw that what we call the placebo effect isn't a medical sideshow. It's a blueprint for how expectation, belief, and meaning shape physiology. Modern neuroscience shows us that the circuits active when you expect pain relief are the same circuits that can alter inflammation, immune signals, and stress chemistry. When the brain anticipates healing, the body follows. When the brain predicts threat, the body responds as if threat is present, even when it isn't. That's the power and the danger of what you call just thinking. Thoughts are not harmless whispers in your skull. They are instructions to a nervous system that obeys them with chemical precision. And that's exactly why most people never change. Not because change is impossible, but because they are trapped in a loop of familiar expectations. They think familiar pain means they are broken. They think anxiety equals truth. They think past experience dictates future possibility. But they're wrong. The brain doesn't have to keep replaying yesterday's script. It just needs a new expectation to rewrite the neurochemical patterns that run your behavior, your body, and your biology. Real life is not outside you, it's inside you, in the predictions your brain makes before a moment unfolds. That's how thoughts become signals, signals become chemistry, and chemistry becomes experience. You've read the science, you've seen the real world context, and you've understood that this isn't fringe anymore. This is physiology, peer-reviewed, globally studied, and increasingly accepted by the world's top researchers. So here's the uncomfortable truth most people won't confront, but you will. If you want a different life, you don't need more information. You need different expectations. You need to train the brain to predict a different future, not hope for it, not wish for it, but expect it at the biological level. You are not powerless. You are not luckless. You are not a victim of circumstance. You are a biological agent, a mind with a nervous system that shapes reality before it even happens. If you want to go deeper, if you want to step off the treadmill of habitual outcomes and into intentional living, read You Are the Placebo in full. Internalize it. Challenge your assumptions with it. Don't just skim it, let it disturb you, because disruption is where transformation begins. And if this series has given you even a fraction of that insight, imagine what the full book will do. Go get it, read it. Don't just think about change, expect it, routinize it, and watch your biology catch up to what your mind has decided. If you found this enlightening, if it challenged you, if it shook something loose, share it, tell someone, and subscribe for more content that doesn't coddle your comfort. It destroys it and builds something stronger. This isn't the end of understanding. This is the beginning of awakening.